Welcome everyone, Simon here from the Wales of Wall Street. Hope you're doing fantastically well wherever you are. I've got an Algorand video here today, ALGO on the exchange. We haven't covered algo for probably a few weeks now. Nothing major. Just wanted to touch on a few points more recently in regards to some of the developments that have been occurring on Algorand, and of course the price point hasn't been moving around too much. We'll talk about that in a bit more detail as well. A few thoughts and feelings behind that, and of course that reminder of Algorand being a potential security, even though a few years ago, of course, it was very much shilled by the same people that are diminishing its suppression. So guys, before we do that, don't forget to smash the subscribe button if you have not done so already. Welcome to the channel. Whether you are an existing or a new person, welcome aboard. Guys, let's go straight into this one. So first and foremost, I just wanted to start really quickly on the aspect of Algorand being a potential security. Now, obviously, this is crazy. And it's certainly something like a few months ago, which ultimately drove that Algorand price down. And has kind of kept it roughly around the sort of 10 to 14-ish cents over the last month-ish. And for sure in my mind, I've always got these feelings and thoughts that, and it was kind of actually, there was a really cool video I watched the other day, Breakpoint 2.0. I'll try and find it and leave it in the description. And this guy was very much talking similarly how I feel in my mind, where there's like not necessarily forced suppression, but certainly something where there's a token or an asset that they just want to bring down for a good period of time because it's too high and start buying it up themselves. And that's more of an institutional level, potentially even at a government level, who knows. This is obviously just like theories at the moment. But for me, Algorand is one of the very, very top projects in the world. And we know that its capabilities, certainly from the sustainability perspective, the speed of it, it's definitely got a giant application throughout decentralization, which is absolutely huge. And there's big, obviously, opportunities and advantages of having that, as well as potentially providing a centralized aspect to it as well. So we've got these weird, interesting factors, and this is kind of like where it gets a bit strange as to why, well, here's Mason Lewis here, just if you get a chance to watch this. But within both of these videos, and these date back to kind of like 2019, where Gensler is talking about Algorand as one of the top solutions. But then we fast forward, what, 3-ish years, and we're seeing Algorand reported as a security, and that came off the back of the Bitfinex kind of like regulation question marks that were around a couple months ago, and it kind of got everyone riled up because there was a few other tokens on there where we were like, well, hang on a minute, that's crazy as well. But particularly Algorand, with its very heavy integration into a lot of the CBDC platforms and projects going on right now, of course all the projects that it's got in its ecosystem, as well as who's behind it. You know, the team is gigantic. And this in particular, this is an absolutely fascinating article to read through. I want to try and find the video version. I haven't gone all the way through this yet, but it's very much around the history of Silvio Micali, who's obviously like the founder of Algorand, and some fascinating points in here. I particularly liked his notion around when he began to start thinking about cryptography and blockchain back in the 80s, and that kind of like relates quite heavily to what I've been speaking about in previous videos. Actually, blockchain has been around for a long, long time. It's just the technological aspects of it are, you know, in terms of server power, cloud, etc., which wasn't there to make this kind of accelerate back then. Who knows where we would be if all of that came in back then, and we've had it for like 20, 30 years. But this is the situation. And there was a really interesting point here around 1985 when he started looking into this, more particularly from a cryptography aspect, obviously way before Algorand was created. And some of the recent sort of Digital Pound Foundation events that I've been to, you know, Michael Manelli's a person I've known for some time. He actually opened one of the speeches, and he was part of that conversation back in the 80s about, you know, blockchain, cryptography, etc. not as we see it today, but certainly the stepping stones of it. So to my point, there's some substantial people behind Algorand in the background and from the very beginning. And I very much doubt they haven't done their due diligence or the application of what Algorand is as a token, or the Algo token, sorry, and what it is as a blockchain. And that's why I kind of lead towards, these kind of concepts that, well, this must be forced downwards for others to take opportunity. And that's kind of like why it awakens me as an investor to be like, well, okay, we're still in these price points, great DCA opportunities to take these lower positions. And I'm sure there are many out there that have either given up or sold it because it's boring or this, that and the other. And I just feel like, certainly with some of the top projects out there at the moment, there's really a defined, it feels like there's a defined back-end strategy to diminish them as much as possible in the limelight. Not too heavily, by the way. This isn't kind of being thrown out there like the XRP security situation, because I do think that there's some, perhaps, I would have thought the relations between the likes of Genza and Algorand are still pretty strong. They've worked together as people for a long time. So this is where I kind of feel like it's a bit of a tactic potentially from the exchange perspective to take advantage of this. I hold my Algorand on Ledger. I think I buy it directly through Ledger as well. I need to double check, but certainly that's when I thought the last time I purchased it through there. But to have labeling Algorand as security, this is absolutely crazy. Where have we seen this before? We've seen it in a multitude of projects, and certainly more recently with the XRP situation. And look how that's turned out. Obviously, like as time's gone by, eventually that get announced, that it's not a security, or like the reasonings behind this, etc. And I'm sure we'll see a bit more of that in the future for other projects that have been deemed that under the SEC. And the other thing as well is, it is usually only just the SEC that does this, which is really weird. But again, it kind of orientates around that point that I just made. Whereas everyone else in the world doesn't seem to have an issue with this. So what is actually going on in the background is, I'm sure many people have opinions. Do definitely leave yours in the comments below. But that's kind of like my thoughts and takes on it. In general, I mean, we'll go into the chart in a minute, but I feel like the volumes are still very high and very consistent. The price is very stable, to be fair, over most other assets. So you see like drips and drabs, kind of keeping it low key. It kind of like feels that orientation. I know we're in a winter and a bear market, so we can't look too much into it. And generally speaking, generically, the markets do drop down and stabilize in this way for long periods of time, certainly sideways action. But yeah, these kind of top projects, it's very good timing. As we talk about that lead up to 2025 with the new RTGS system, the SWIFT systems, etc. I mean, on that point, of course, this aspect here, former PayPal leads launch cross-border payment network to rival SWIFT. This is talking about Six Clovers. Six Clovers is built on the Algorand network, so heavily involved in this CBDC kind of operation and prospect. And we talk about the aspect here of the high performance of this, boasting 46,000 transactions per second. That's quite crazy. 165 million per hour. It's quite substantial. So Algorand, not just as a chain for itself, the ability for it to be a platform for other ecosystems, other projects, is phenomenal. So you see this talking about the SWIFT protocol replacement. And then you've got people from previously who worked for PayPal, obviously a big sort of private entity in terms of holding currency and finance themselves. We know what PayPal is about. We've seen that progression from when it began to where it is today, of course. So that's why I'm kind of sitting there going, well, you can't like essentially fully block a chain or come out with all this craziness saying that it's a security or not security when you know for a fact that it's working probably with all the CBDC projects that the US government, etc., and the SEC are working with anyway. So it kind of doesn't stamp up to me in that way, in my opinion. So, of course, recently as well, it was very interesting timing how then the AlgoFi project that was working in the Algorand chain, that started announcing it was shutting down off the project. They hold like 55% or something of the Algo tokens. That's remained to be seen whether that's all been sold off yet. That might have been one of the big trigger points of the demise of the price. But yeah, again, coincidental timing of all these news narratives, and certainly the application towards the new financial system arguably kicking off within the next sort of 18 months. It's very interesting, and we see it with all the other top projects as well, the suppression, the reduction. Yet you're talking about the new financial world, and it's still at these low prices. As I said, of course, bear market, winter market, absolutely, macro events going on in the world, but on the other hand, it's kind of like, these are significant projects, technologies. So we'll just have to see how that goes, of course. But, you know, it's going to be interesting to see its development over the next couple of years. Certainly with Algorand, as I said, there's not much giant information on Algorand news-wise since the last kind of video that we did. I just thought I'd bring these particular areas of topics together because it does build a bit of a picture and more question marks as to why we're sat at the prices we are with Algorand. And on that point, let's jump into the chart. So we're currently floating around 11.4 cents ish as of recording. This has been kind of bouncing off that 10-cent mark to 12-cent mark for some time over the last few weeks, certainly. You know, past experiences here, we've had nearly 14 cents back here in June, and then obviously all the way back here. And this is where I kind of see this momentum, is even through the winter market where everything else was diminishing. We had this upward trend in some of the markets to take us up February all the way up to 30 cents. So there's still an opportunity for a double position from where we are today. I still think in general, obviously, as the big bull markets come in, we're going to see the significant higher prices again, back up to those, maybe towards $5 this time around, maybe pushing up to $7. Who knows? I mean, if you look at the fib retracement levels, that is an argument definitely that those will be the next big stages, probably that 5 and 7.5 kind of matches to what we just said a second ago. But where we are right now, you can see in this conversation I was mentioning earlier in the video, is this whole momentum, not necessarily volatility, but certainly sustainability around this sort of 12-cent mark. So for me, this is a good DCA opportunity. It does show, you know, as I said, sustainability in that kind of area for me to go, okay, that's a great position. I do have the buy orders at lower positions as well, just above that 10-cent mark, and I do have one just below the 10-cent mark as well. I don't have any lower than that at the moment, as I do believe that we have some really significant kind of power points at that kind of 10-cent area for us not to drag too much lower than that. We did see that roughly on the 10th of June, where we got to a low, I believe, of 9 cents on the nose pretty much. So it's definitely a possibility to see us come back to those potential levels again. But at the moment, as I said, the manual options for me are perfect. I think this is a great area of interest. And as I said in the recent Hedera video, of course, there's lots of distractions going on. There's a lot of things going on with the SEC and the XRP, etc. So I think sometimes focus gets taken away on some things. But as I mentioned as well, I mean, look at these volumes, guys. You can see them on top left. Hopefully you can see that in relative detail. More than welcome to obviously go on CoinMarketCap and see for yourselves. The volumes are there. The price itself doesn't move significantly much. But that's kind of what I'm getting at, is the reflection points that the volumes are quite big, but the price doesn't move as much. So therefore, is it kind of not necessarily shaking people out? I think those days were a while back. I think this is now just people going, oh, there's no point in me selling because I'm at a loss. But also on the other hand, it's kind of like at these price points, people can get away with, you know, institutional level, you know, outtake of algo from the exchanges, etc. To keep it still floating, and people still obviously day trading this, which is why you don't see those huge bounces unless big news comes out. So we can see that is definitely happening. What's going to be of interest to me is we've had about a week at the moment of this sort of 11.5 cent mark. If this doesn't sustain itself, that's where we could start seeing back down to that 10. I'm definitely interested, obviously, in accumulating as much Algorand as possible. I was late to the party accumulating Algorand. I was even DCing on the downward spectrum around the sort of 20 odd cent mark earlier on this year. Just because like I was focusing on different projects. Algorand was always in my mind. But you know, once it started coming down, I was more interested in that. Of course, I didn't have a crystal ball. I didn't know how much lower it was going to go. But my point being around that part, of course, is when we look at the chart all the way back, you know, it's currently matching those kind of price points around the 2020 mark that we saw back here. March 2020, of course, we had that huge crash across the world. But my point being is that from this point onwards, we do have the opportunity of hitting those higher points again. As I said earlier, we could reach those $5 marks to $7 marks in the next bull cycle. But as we approach those higher markers, you're going to see a lot of volatility. There's a huge gap here. So there's not enough sort of data points to suggest real support resistance levels. So that's going to be really interesting and possibly fun, or not fun, when we get to those kind of areas again. But either way, it kind of identifies and kind of confirms in our heads, or certainly my head, that these areas of interest right now are here. Back to that point about volumes, we look at the RSIs again on the bottom left, 45, 42, 28 and 14 day respectively, and the indicators performance wise on the right hand side. It's suggesting that this bear market is still continuing. Right now, Algorand is in a very good bite point, certainly from my personal perspective. But look at this, it's very level headed in the sense that what goes out comes in, almost matching up. The volumes that you can see on the top left, again, Coin Market Cap can identify this as well on a daily basis. It's showing that there is partially a suppression tactic here. In my thought process here is that as we get bored of it, or we're selling it off, whatever it is, there's enough volume coming in to match up what's being taken out, and it's almost what was going on with XRP for so long. And we know that Algorand is a top project, and certainly one that's heavily related with the financial industry, which is why the SEC kind of stuff isn't helping. And I do think that plays on people's minds because it obviously becomes a bit of a risk in their heads. But for me, I would look beyond that, and I'm like, well, this is going to sustain itself for sure. And it's going to be a huge project within the sphere of finance around the world, and certainly the projects and the ecosystem that it's building and working with. So this is why I think Algorand is kind of stuck where it is at the moment. I think is a massive advantageous point, whatever's behind this, for us to take advantage of. And that's pretty much kind of what I'm thinking out loud about all of this aspect of Algorand. Let us know what you think in the comments below. I'm going to wrap this video up here right now. Thanks for watching, and we'll definitely update you when there's more substantial news from Algorand. Anything big that happens in between, I will definitely do a YouTube short. But until then, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye bye.